Well, it wouldn't be an event in EIZ if there were not severe technical difficulties. Happily, Mark's computer is communicating with the projector. That was the big concern. We didn't know we should be concerned about the lights. Welcome everyone. I'm pleased to. I can't see you, but I'm pleased to know that you're here, and for this lecture. This lecture is one of 4 lectures sponsored by the College of Humanities, and it's being hosted this year by the Humanities Center. My name is Rex Nielsen. I'm the director of our center. Just a little bit about the P.A. Christensen Lecture. It's a lecture that's sponsored annually by the College of Humanities. It's named for Parley A. Christensen, who was a beloved professor in the English department. And over the years, we've had such a marvelous array of colleagues who have been honored to give the P.A. Christensen lecture. You can see the list of those previous lecturers in your program. And this year, the recipient of this lectureship is Marc Yamada from the Department of Comparative Arts and Letters. We're going to begin with an opening prayer offered by Robert Coulson, and then Mark will be introduced by his colleague Matt Ansel, and then following that introduction, Mark will give his presentation. Thank you.
Our Father in heaven, let's try that again. Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be gathered together as friends and colleagues this day, and we're grateful that we'll have the opportunity to hear about Mark and his interesting work. We're grateful that we got the technical difficulties sorted, and we pray that things will go smoothly from here on out. We're grateful for Mark and all his collegiality and his great mentoring of students. We pray that thy Spirit will be here with us and bless him and bless us, and we pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I'm honored to introduce Dr. Marc Yamada for the P.A. Christensen Lecture. We've been friends and colleagues for a long time, kind of leading parallel lives, at least superficially. I do find introduction to be a difficult genre, along with rank and status file statements, cover letters, and greeting cards, so that's my best attempt. I can never seem to get the right tone. I tend toward the informal, so I thought about several ways I could go about this. And one was just to read the highlights from his CV. We met in Stephen Sondrup's class when Mark was a comparative literature MA student, having received his BA in Japanese at BYU previously. He got his PhD in Japanese from Berkeley. We both happen to have diplomas signed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's true. We were both hired at BYU the same year, and we both had the best assignment in the college, if not the university, which was International Cinema Director. But his long list of awards is where all the similarities between us end. Looking through them, I think the most impressive is the Dean's Normative Time Award at Berkeley. And what kind of person finishes on time? Not I. Mark has published two monographs, Locating Heisei in Japanese Fiction and Film, The Historical Imagination of the Lost Decades, and Koreeda Hirokazu, Shared Spaces of Filmmaking. And he's working on, is going for a trilogy with another book on Murakami Haruki, which I'm sure will be dedicated to former Dean Van Gessel. Anyway, the CV is impressive, but it's a bit dry. I considered kind of a roast of Mark, but that didn't seem appropriate. So I thought back to a time when we were both on a committee for an annual guest lectureship honoring an important pillar in our department's formation. A colleague, much more eloquent than I am, wrote an impressive encomium in his retirement, so I've likened those words to Mark. They read, "When we who have the boon of knowing him well are in the presence of Marc Yamada, what is the R that emanates from him? Friendly warmth, quiet dignity, the self-assurance that need not boast, earnestness spiced with wit and kindly humor, the knowing glint in the eye, unobtrusive force like the purposeful reaching out of the roots of a tree. We sense in him a man who has achieved the mellowed maturity and wisdom of a character created by another of his literary idols, Browning's Rabbi Ben Ezra. I'm actually not sure about the last part, but the dangers of likening. All hyperbole aside, Marc is a model colleague, a beloved teacher, and an even better friend. The kind of friend who will listen to my problems, who will take me on meticulously planned trips to Japan, and who will tell me when I'm being stupid or wrong. And the weird thing is that he's always has time to dedicate himself to department tasks, to chat in the hall or his office, as he never seems too busy or harried, yet is more productive than many of us. Most of us, when we have a publication come out, have probably put our colleagues through some of the anguish, and we certainly at least tell people about it and experience the rare congratulations for finishing a project. I think this is a good and maybe necessary thing, but there are honestly a couple of surprises for you on Marc's CV because there's never any fanfare at all. One last thing, and this will surprise those of you who know me. For a while in the 90s, I was sympathetic to the Detroit Lions. I know, right? And it was because of Barry Sanders, arguably one of the top 3 running backs of all time, and he's not 3. Sanders was a joy to watch, but throughout his career, he consciously, and I would say pathologically almost, avoided records, awards, and any kind of public recognition. When he won the Heisman Trophy in college, the camera panned on him. He looked genuinely embarrassed. After every touchdown, and there were many, instead of spiking the ball, throwing it in the stands, or breaking out into a solo or team choreographed celebration dance, he would simply return the ball to the referee and go to the sideline. So I've embarrassed Marc enough, and I'm sure he's angry with me, but I'm just happy to see him get some well-earned recognition. I'm sure he's going to enliven us intellectually, and then return the ball to the referee and rejoin the team.
Thank you so much, Matt. I asked him to make it a roast, and so it was kind of a warm roast, right? He did a good job. I'm honored to work with such great colleagues in the College of Humanities, many of whom were my instructors when I was a student here. I still remember taking courses from some of the legends of our college, the postmodern novel with Stephen Sondrup, contemporary American poetry with Lance Larson, and representations of the divine with Stan Benfell, among others. But perhaps it was the semester I took 2 courses on modern Japanese literature from Van Gessel and Scott Miller that shaped my career the most. So it is in their honor that I speak today. And it's in deference to Van that I chose not to speak, as Matt mentioned, on my recent project on his favorite writer, Murakami Haruki. Instead, I'll focus on the films of director Koreeda Hirokazu. I started working on Koreeda as a Humanities Center Fellow a few years ago and presented some of my early work there, so I apologize if this is repetitious. Hopefully it's more polished now. I begin with a quote from Koreeda's 2011 film, I Wish. Kenji, a 30-something underemployed member of a rock band, pictured here with his 2 sons, and type A wife Nozomi, tries to explain to his family the value of his music. He says, wouldn't life be suffocating if everything had a purpose? Keep that quote in mind and we'll come back to it. Let me first deviate a little bit. Like many, one of my favorite things to do at BYU is to lead study abroad programs. Though study abroad is not the vacation that some think it is, we are fortunate to have the opportunity to introduce students to places we love around the world. Yet as rewarding as study abroad is, it's also challenging when things go wrong, when a hurricane disrupts travel plans or students get lost, both of which have happened to me. So I'm thankful for the rules established by international study programs which ensure that everyone is safe. However, I have to admit there is one rule that is broken semi-regularly on my programs. And the breaking of this rule seems almost inevitable. On all programs run through ISB, students are prohibited from dating other students. And I make it a point to inform them about this rule in our preparation course during the semester before we leave. I say, fall in love with Kyoto, but don't fall in love with each other. Yet, despite being fully aware of this prohibition, students still develop romantic relationships with other students. I know this because I've been invited to their weddings. A few years ago, when my family and I attended the nuptials of 2 members of our 2018 program, I asked other students there when the couple officially started dating. And they looked at me with the sort of disdainful disbelief. Yamada-sensei, they were dating on the program. Now, I'm not an idiot. I had a sense that something was going on when I saw them steal off together during lunch breaks. Now, of course, the idea of dating is vague. Does it mean that you actually go out on dates or just start hanging out? You could make the case that they officially started dating after the program ended, kind of like the awkward way we try to rationalize marrying someone from our own mission. Though I'm not exactly sure what the impetus is for the non-dating rule, I'm pretty sure romances occur regularly on study abroad, and ISP, like the rest of us, isn't too concerned about this happening, and yet it's still a rule. So what do we do with it? How do we enforce it? If you interpret the dating policy in a strict sense, the natural conclusion is that these students broke the rules. So we can enforce the rules more strictly, we can increase surveillance, but then you think, is more enforcement really the answer? After all, the program puts students together in situations where they grow close, making lifelong friendships. And though these relationships were not part of the learning outcomes of the program, they nevertheless contributed to the life of the program. The weddings I've attended provided a great opportunity to renew bonds with old friends. My apologies for the somewhat contrived example. My goal isn't to point out the holes in ISP rules or to suggest that we shouldn't follow them, since we have members of the Kennedy Center here. Instead, I want to consider the nature of the relationships that emerge spontaneously and unexpectedly within organizations. How do they challenge our notion of organizational cohesiveness? And more importantly, how do they reveal the source of life in organizational life? The films of director Koreeda Hirokazu reveal how life emerges within everyday organizations, like families, film sets, and even the afterlife. In Japan, where rules are the basis of an efficient capitalist society, Koreeda's documentaries and features explore the surplus of sociality that emerges in the act of working and living together in assigned groups, a surplus that organizational logic and capital struggle to appropriate. His films feature relationships that push the boundaries of the normative family determined by blood that serve as a social safety net for the economy. In one film, 6 unrelated individuals form a temporary family supported by shoplifting. In another film, a father's love for a child not of his own blood emerges as a redundancy in a story about 2 families who discover that their 8-year-old sons were switched at birth. Though the parents are compelled by social pressure to trade their non-biological child whom they raised since birth for their biological child who is a stranger to them, parental bonds based on time, not blood, disrupt the story's closure. Through their examination of these unconventional associations, these films reveal a productive tension between the positivistic forces of embodiment that regulate organizational life and the forces of desire by which organizational life is disrupted, expanded, and enriched. They show how organizations become communities. The balance of my presentation will make a case for the centrality of the arts in restoring communal imagination to organizational experience, focusing on film. By looking at the work of one director, I hope to show that film does not just depict communal experience, but the very excesses that emerge from cinematic production and spectatorship renew the shared nature of our interactions. For film is both a structured system consisting of shots that are edited together to create an overall effect, and an artistic medium from which meaning is constantly escaping and developing into new forms. Communities in Koreeda's work are formed through a shared sense of memory that is facilitated by the medium of film. For Koreeda, filmmaking is analogous to memory. Not only does film serve as a repository for memories, but the process of recording and viewing cinematic images replicates the process of remembering, both in a personal and a communal way. The connection between film and shared memory manifests in 1996 Without Memory, a documentary that focuses on a man named Sekine Hiroshi, who lost his capacity for short-term memory due to medical malpractice that was caused by cutbacks in the national healthcare system. To function every day, Hiroshi must depend on his wife and 2 sons, along with a number of hacks that he developed, including leaving a system of notes that remind him of who he is and what he needs to do. Through sequences that are both heartbreaking and sometimes comical, the film reveals what it's like to live without a sense of continuity from day to day. In one scene, the camera captures Hiroshi's confusion as he stares at baby clothes drying in the porch of their home, forgetting that his wife gave birth to a baby girl after he fell ill. Koreeda soon realizes that his crew is not just documenting Hiroshi's efforts to regain his memory, they are participating in the process as well. Their periodic visits to tape sessions with the Sekine family creates a routine that shapes Hiroshi's recovery. He starts to recognize them, even recalling their names. As Koreeda and his team become part of Hiroshi's story, Hiroshi also takes on the role of filmmaker as well. During shooting, Koreeda provides Hiroshi with his own video camera, allowing him to document his experience. The result is a film within film that reflects the way Hiroshi's own memory, like his own act of filmmaking, is swallowed up in the remembering of those around him. There is no one master film or one memory that captures his experience. Rather, films like memories have the capacity to carry within themselves the basis of other films, other experiences. The idea of film memory as a shared experience is developed in 1998's Afterlife. The feature film tells of a group of recently deceased individuals who spend a week at a way station between life and death before moving on. At the beginning of the 7-day period, the deceased are greeted by caseworkers who instruct them to choose one memory to take with them to eternity. The caseworkers, who also labor as amateur filmmakers, adapt the memory into a short film at an adjacent studio and screen it for the visitors at the end of the week. Though fantastical in its premise, the film is based in reality. Koreeda wrote the script by posing this central question to hundreds of non-actors, many of whom would eventually become characters in the film. One newly deceased man named Ichiro struggles to choose a defining moment in his humdrum life. His caseworker is a man named Takashi, who died in World War II and remains in the station in the mid-1990s when the film is seemingly set. The reason Takashi is still in the station is because he can't decide on a single memory and has stuck around to help others choose one. Many see a connection between Takashi and the Bodhisattva or the helper Buddhas in the Mahayana tradition, who delay enlightenment so they can bring others to truth. To help prompt Ichiro's memory, Takashi, the helper Buddha, provides Ichiro footage of his entire life on a set of 71 VHS cassettes, one tape for each year of his life. Collectively, the tapes purport to represent an authentic view of his life in contrast to the films made at the way station that recreate the memories of the newly deceased. Koreeda came up with the idea of storing someone's entire life on a series of videotapes when he sat alone one evening early in his career editing television documentaries in a room lined with VHS cassettes. Ichiro spends hours sitting before a small TV watching scenes of his life on video. The scenes from each tape capture Ichiro's experiences with a static camera in mostly medium to long shots that are shown from an ambiguous perspective. Is this Ichiro's view of his own life from a disembodied viewpoint? Is it the pure seeing of the cinematic apparatus itself? Or is it the view of a director? This particular shot may provide a clue. The scene is shot front on with a stationary camera that is placed on the ground in the position of what is known as a tatami shot, a shot taken by a camera on the tatami or mat floors of Japanese houses, with Ichiro seated on the floor eating breakfast. The way the scene is shot would be recognizable to those familiar with Japanese film because it references the work of another auteur, Ozu Yasujiro, who often used shots like these to capture scenes of domestic life in feature films like Tokyo Story from 1952. Yet, how can the tapes authentically capture the past when there's obviously mediation at work? Though the tapes are given priority due to their supposed faithfulness to the past, their capacity to remember is based more in their fictionality. While the images stimulate Ichiro's own acts of remembering, the cinematic medium through which his life is shown invites shared remembering as well. The use of Ozu acknowledges the remembering of film history itself, while activating the memory function of audiences who would recognize allusions to classical cinema and later family dramas on television which appropriated Ozu's style. Beyond the images on the tape, the material culture of VHS cassettes themselves might serve as an object of nostalgia for a certain segment of the audience. Prompted by the videos, Ichiro finally chooses a memory, though it's technically not a memory because he forgot it happened, a simple moment sitting on a park bench with his wife Kyoko. Kyoko, coincidentally, we learned, died a few years earlier and made her own film when she passed through. In the film, she is sitting on a bench with her fiancé before he went off to World War II, years before she met and married Ichiro. Unbeknownst to Ichiro, Kyoko's ex-fiancé is actually Takashi, the same caseworker who is helping him choose a memory. Now, Afterlife does not use this turn of events to create melodrama, however, but to show both the private and interconnected nature of memory. Learning that he was part of someone else's memory prompts Takashi to finally choose his own, but not one from his mortal existence before coming to the way station as a visitor and later a caseworker. He wants to remember his time at the station. Sitting on the same bench that was built to shoot Ichiro's memory and one that resembles Kyoko's memory, she treats the space as part of a film set rather than a recreation of a Tokyo park. Or maybe it's both. Maybe he's part of Kyoko's memory, Ichiro's memory, along with his own memory, working with his fellow crew members. A shot, reverse shot, underscores this layering of memories. A long shot of Takashi sitting on the bench in the dark studio cuts to capture what he sees: his friend standing behind a camera against a backdrop painted as heaven with clouds covering a blue sky. In this way, Afterlife reveals the nature of film as a shared memory device. Film remembers not just by faithfully recording experiences and storing them in physical form, like videotapes to be watched later. Even when capturing personal memory, film always seems to exceed this function, as its capacity to remember expands the more mediated the representation of the past, the more the process of staging, screening, and recording the past encourages participants to recall their own memory or even merge filmic memory with their own. Imagining the formation of community around memory is increasingly important as a loss of historical awareness neutralizes the potential for a recollection oriented towards positive communal action. The emphasis placed on individual action in the eternal now of our present-focused economic condition, neoliberalism, argues Enzo Traverso, discourages the formation of communities built around a common history. As a consequence of this loss of historical awareness, those who find themselves out of sync with the individualism and present-focused nature of the dominant economic order, argues Alberto Toscano, often turn to a mythical past that they seek to restore through extremism and even fascism. Cordeda's Distance imagines a view of communal commemoration that doesn't devolve into extremism. Shot like a home movie, the feature film follows 5 protagonists whose family members were involved in a terrorist attack years ago. The extremist group to which their family members belonged released poison into the water supply of a Tokyo suburb and then committed mass suicide at a remote cabin hideout near a lake. On the anniversary of the attack, the 5 protagonists make their way to the cabin to memorialize their family members. Their shared grief and ostracism from society as relatives of the dead radicals have inspired them to form this group to better understand the motives of their family members by reenacting them, spending the night together in a small cabin. While this reenactment might encourage the protagonists to repeat the violence of their dead relatives, Distance explores how the repetition involved in commemoration can result in a shared memorialization of the past without seeking a restoration of it. Like the dead radicals, the protagonists have come to the cabin to find community away from a mainstream society that shuns them, and yet they don't mythologize the dead or rehearse their ideological worldview, choosing instead to memorialize them privately. The protagonists take turns saying silent prayers on the pier over the lake where their family members died. They recall their last interaction with their dead relatives, interactions shown through flashbacks that represent a reclaiming of the identities of the dead from labels like terrorist or freedom fighter. In this way, the community the protagonists form in reaction to the stigma of being associated with radicalism, rather than through a renewal of the radical spirit, provides a model of commemoration that brings individuals together while avoiding some of the more toxic elements that can arise when seeking to revive past traditions. Along with enriching our understanding of communities created through memory, Cordeda's films envision the physical and imagined spaces of social connection that both shape individual and communal bodies and are shaped by them. The neighborhoods and cities in which we live are both actual places through which we move and virtual spaces envisioned through symbolic and representational means. The material design of the city is only fully realized, critics argue, by imagining it as a unified whole, a process that is achieved through visual media, among other means, and its capacity to connect city spaces through editing or to track movement throughout them. In their portrayal of urban air spaces, Cordeda's films feature all kinds of movement directed by city design. Trains rush through towns, bicycles cruise down dark city streets, and bodies climb steep hills overlooking the city. Through this directed movement, traveling bodies are assimilated into the social, corporate, and familial organizations across urban areas. Yet because traveling bodies captured on film are instrumental in constituting the imagined unity of the city in the first place, bodies can claim spaces temporarily and affect our perception of them based on the manner in which they pass through them. In contrast to regulated forms of travel that reinforce the organized nature of urban areas, superfluous movement that exceeds the utilitarian design of the city by bodies that are not irrevocably tied to this design, argues Michel Dessertu, re-envision the possibilities of the space. The very transitory nature of travel captured on film enables this reimagining of space through movement. Because travelers do not claim places indefinitely, like protesters who forcibly fracture city spaces by their occupation of them, the movement of travelers allows us to visualize other possibilities that exist within the space of a whole and continuous urban landscape. Staircases, for instance, are utilitarian spaces designed primarily to link one part of the city to another. Yet the unique way characters use stairs allows traveling bodies to claim them temporarily. Images of characters conversing, wandering aimlessly, and even playing on stairs do not subvert the logic of city planning, but merely provide a glimpse of other possibilities that arise within it. Cordeda's films claim space by borrowing Ozu's pillow shots, shots that temporarily pause the flow of the film by resting on a location or object. Pillow shots take their name from the short addendums of classical poetry, or pillow words, that reflect on Japanese verse. Two classic examples of pillow shots include a sequence from Ozu's Late Spring, in which a shot of a woman falling asleep is interspersed with a 10-second cutaway to a lamp in the same room. In Tokyo Story, three women leave a room after a conversation, but the camera remains. The shot then cuts to an empty hallway in the house, pausing for several seconds, before cutting to a shot of children coming home after school. In both of these scenes, Ozu is not prepping the space for the next scene or revealing the importance of an object in it, a la Hitchcock. The very superfluousness of these shots resets our view of the space, allowing characters and the audience to claim them. This is the case in 1995's Maboroshi, which reframes our view of the city by contrasting directed forms of movement that connect locations, represented by a train moving in a linear path, with a view of the city as lived space through which a character rides his bike home. The dynamics of cinematic spectatorship are central to the communal claiming of space through movement. Space is co-opted in a material embrace with the audience, the embodied characters, and the diegetic worlds they inhabit, argues Kaja Hiltonen. The material embrace is due to the physical or even tactile nature of film, a characteristic of the cinematic experience that is often given little attention. The dynamic effects of panning, for instance, induce an actual physical response in spectators by making them turn their heads to follow camera movement. For Giuliano Bruno, viewers sense movement through space by the means of the physical action of characters who focalize their experience on screen. Movement allows characters to transmit the kinesthetic experience of the diegetic space to viewers. The more visceral the movement, accordingly, the more travel can activate the imagination of spectators. For this reason, Cordeato's films are often set in high locations, on hills of a coastal city, in a cramped housing unit on the top floor of an apartment building, and on cliffs overlooking the ocean. The strain of climbing up steep stairs and paths not only serves as a form of bonding for characters through the mutual claiming of space, but because the climb is captured through cinematography that it stimulates the tactile experience of embodied spectators, they invite us to claim the space as well. While establishing shots introduce locations, character movement allows spectators to become part of them. In Our Little Sister, three sisters arrive at their father's remote hometown to attend his funeral. They are met at the station by their half-sister Suzu, who directs them to their hotel. On the way there, Suzu decides to take an alternate path that leads up a sharp incline through the woods. A high-angle shot captures the three sisters at the bottom of the slope, suggesting a daunting climb for the girls, especially Yoshino, the laziest of the three. Cutting to a low-angle shot of the sisters climbing the slope from behind with Yoshino struggling in the back accentuates the sensation of ascending the steep hill. The strain of climbing is captured again later when Suzu takes her sisters to her favorite location in town. A jump cut segues to a high-angle shot of the sisters climbing yet another hill. Again, we see Yoshino struggle to ascend the path, huffing and puffing as the steep incline affects her gait. The shots of Yoshino's physical struggle against the terrain humanize her in the viewer's minds as the character to whom they can relate, and the sensory information relayed by her struggle serves to unite viewers in an embrace with the physical world of the film. Linking the audience to the environment through the mediation of characters who move through it transforms abstract geography into spaces full of meaning for both characters and viewers. Because our view of the city as a unified space relies on the mediation of cinematic imagination, the capturing of bodies that congregate, play, and move idiosyncratically through them contributes to the constitution of even the most regulated urban areas, always in negotiation with the socioeconomic realities behind the efficiency and logic of urban design. In this way, the excesses of cinematic production and spectatorship encourage us to move beyond hermeneutic attempts to locate meaning in individual film artifacts. They create moments when meaning extends beyond the formal boundaries of film production and consumption, blending the experiences of filmmakers, actors, and global audiences. The role of film in restoring a communal imagination to organizational experience speaks of the larger function of the arts to renew the shared nature of our daily interactions at a time when many see a decline in the social capital of first world nations. A decline, they warn, may lead to the loss of civic engagement at the basis of democratic traditions. I can think of no better venue for restoring community through the arts than international cinema at BYU, as Matt mentioned in the introduction. Believe it or not, this photo was taken about 3 or 4 days before the university shut down for the pandemic. It might have actually been one of the reasons for the pandemic on BYU campus. This is a screening of the South Korean film Parasite that was shown at BYU, and we had, at the time, Chip and Milo Oscarson and I were the co-directors, and we had 4 screenings of the film that were completely sold out. We had to schedule a 5th one. We scheduled it in the Joseph Smith building in the auditorium here, thinking that we'd get maybe 500 people. I think it seats maybe 800 to 900. It was packed again, and people were sitting on the floor. I remember, I think Chip, before we had the screening of the film, got up and asked the students and the people in attendance how they heard about the screening, and we thought, okay, it's going to be through social media. It turns out it was by word of mouth. The people were actually telling each other about this great film that was playing. And it was really impressive for 2 reasons. One is that there was a sense of hunger for entertainment that was also thought-provoking. But another thing that was interesting was that after the film ended, people didn't just depart and go home, but they kind of stuck around and wanted to process the film in groups. And it was great to see how kind of artistic experience can lead to this kind of communal Yet how do we measure the benefits that our students gain from engaging with a great film, novel, or work of art? The current pressures to monetize learning force us to focus on efficiency in planning curriculum. During the time I taught at Wake Forest University, where everyone seemed so focused on immediate success after graduation, students would often tell me that they want to take my classes but couldn't because their whole college career was mapped out ahead of time, often by parents concerned about their professional futures. They had no time for something as trivial as watching a 2-hour film. Certainly, we need to recognize the utilitarian purpose of the humanities so that we can communicate with those who speak in those terms and advocate for the importance of it. We can all quote our former colleague Scott Springer's article on the value of soft skills in the workplace, and we regularly revise our learning outcomes to better define the product that our education delivers. However, when we treat the arts like a commodity, a tool to succeed in the job market, or a means to acquire skills like language ability and cultural knowledge, not that these things don't have value and don't matter, don't the arts lose a little of what makes them so essential, their expanding, revitalizing, and enriching power? When we place too much emphasis on the efficiency and teleology of education in the humanities, don't we in some ways limit the growth that assessment models cannot predict or contain? Hopefully, it's not an either-or situation. Now, I realize I'm speaking to a sympathetic audience here, and I'm not saying anything new. We all feel the pressure placed on the humanities to be more utilitarian. But even as I try to be more efficient in my teaching, I find myself rebelling at times, encouraging my busy students to take advantage of the serendipitous joys of a humanities education, taking a chance on a class on poetry, going to see an obscure Chinese film in international cinema, learning Italian just for the fun of it, or even falling in love on study abroad. With Kyoto, of course, right? In the end, maybe we can all be a bit more like the dreamer musician Kenji, who might have said, if he went to a university, and if he did, let's face it, he was most likely a humanities major, wouldn't a university education be suffocating if everything had a purpose? Thank you very much.